On today's Edge of Wonder, we revisit why Paradise was the focal point of the California fires. We'll discuss Nikola Tesla's infamous backstory and how he allegedly contacted other solar systems and who funded his work. Also, we expose the Clinton Foundation and its dark agenda within the deep state. All this and more as we bring you part one with Dr. Michael Salla. And now, we ask that you please keep your minds in their fully open position for takeoff as we depart for the Edge of Wonder.
Hey everyone, welcome to Edge of Wonder. Ben and Rob here. We have the privilege today of talking to Dr. Salla all the way in Hawaii. Hello, Dr. Salla. Thanks for being with us.
Aloha. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, as you remember, last time we talked to you, we were actually on the subject of a really big natural disaster, which was the eruptions in Hawaii. And today we actually wanted to talk to you about the current natural disaster, at least one of the questions.
Or so-called natural disaster,
Right.
what some people are saying.
Exactly. And there is the crux of this entire episode, is we actually really wanted to ask you about the fires in California and what you know about them and what you can tell our audience about them. Is there anything fishy going on or not? Are these natural? Is it man-made? What is your research
Well,
told
and
you?
before you answer that too, so we're getting a lot of comments from fans that were living in California, just saying, like, what I was reading, they were just telling us, like, this is the weirdest fire they've ever seen, and they've been in a few different fires. And to them, you know, they were just kind of asking me, like, do you guys know what's going on? Because this just whole thing just seems weird and fishy, and then they were trying to put in this train system as well. So I don't know. That's why we wanted to have your take on it.
Right. Well, weather modification has been something that has been going on for some time now. There are a series of satellites in Earth orbit that are used by the deep state to basically implement weather modification around the planet to promote their agendas. And so it has impacted many different things. You've had the hurricanes in Florida, where you've had kind of these satellite systems being used to kind of manufacture these hurricanes, or to at least augment them and then steer them in a particular direction. In Hawaii, there was a pretty massive attempt to basically geoengineer a pretty sizable detachment of part of the Big Island called the Helena Slump to generate a tidal wave that would devastate the west coast of the United States and other parts of Asia. And so when you look at all of these series of events in 2018, and then you have the California wildfires happening, you have to ask yourself, well, you know, were any of these kind of satellites that we know have been used for weather modification in any way implicated? And the direct evidence that such a thing did actually involve satellites was many of the homes in many parts of the areas affected by the wildfires. You see the homes being destroyed, but the surrounding trees untouched. And people are asking the obvious question, well, how can this be? You know, how can a wildfire sweep in, destroy homes, but leave the surrounding trees and forests untouched? And so, you know, there's been a very lame stream attempt to explain this away as something caused by the embers of their houses as they burn, going to affect the other houses, but leaving the trees unaffected. And it's very unconvincing. It's basically them trying to explain away what was really happening. And I think that they were targeting particular areas of California and Paradise, the town of Paradise in particular, because there was a reason why they wanted that destroyed. And they were using some of these satellite systems with microwave weapons to target these areas, to destroy the homes. And Paradise in particular was attacked because this was a place where there are a number of very highly evolved people, and here, when I say people, that can also mean extraterrestrials that were involved in building a new type of society that could be launched as a prototype for the future. So I think that these wildfires were deliberately a result of these kind of weather modification satellite technologies that the deep state was using. And there's an interesting Q connection, and I'll talk about that. But if you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to talk about that.
That's amazing. We didn't even need to transition there. You just brought it up. Our next question.
Well, before we go with that, actually, so we just talked to David Wilcock, and our videos on him are already out now. And this is exactly what David Wilcock was describing. In fact, he went really into detail about who these beings were that were living in paradise, and how he has heard of many of the insiders that he's talking to have brought up paradise for many years. In fact, he was saying over a decade that he's heard about this now. Coming into that, the last fire that happened in California, I remember Q had a post. I can't remember word for word what he said, but he was talking about, he said, California was trying to be a sanctuary state, and they were trying to get funding from the government, and because they couldn't get this funding, Q hinted to the fact, he didn't come out directly, I don't think, and said it, but hinted to the fact that, more asking a question, are these fires related to this because they couldn't get funding? Now because of the fires, it's like they're going to get funding.
Well, and then you have President Trump coming out very publicly and saying he's no longer going to funnel federal dollars into the devastations going on there. People are getting really upset about it, but I think they're not necessarily looking into this deeper than just what they see on the surface. I don't know if you have a response to that, Dr. Sala.
Well, Q has made some references there to the California wildfires actually being a kind of false flag attack, that this was really done to kind of distract people from, what's happening behind the scenes with the ongoing secret grand jury investigations, the sealed indictments, and the kind of declassification underway for all of these documents that are exposing the deep state. And so rather than have the media focus on these kinds of things that are unfolding, you have these natural disasters that are created, or you have kind of tragedies, national tragedies, whether it's a fire or a hurricane, or whether it's some kind of shooter going rampart, going amok. It's a false flag attack. So the Q has been warning about these false flag attacks that the deep state specializes in. That they have a whole litany of things that they are able to do and people that they are able to activate to perpetuate these false flag attacks. And so with regard to the California wildfires, Q referred to that as actually being something that was one of these false flag attacks. They have multiple kind of agendas behind it. One was to kind of sidetrack or distract people. The second was to kind of raise funds for the state of California because California has been missing out on a lot of federal funds. So they were really trying to do that. But what I found really very interesting was a post by Q that was released yesterday. Q referred to this event that happened on November 11, which was this global seismic event that scientists can't explain. They say that it had the characteristics of this kind of global seismic event that happens after, typically after a massive earthquake, but yet there was no earthquake, and that the earthquake was absent, but you had the kind of the global seismic aftermath going around. And what was very interesting, that it was a much more coherent, much more uniform pattern, and that there was 17 seconds between the pulses, which was very interesting, and it lasted for about 20 minutes. And in that 20 minutes, you had very coherent, very uniform pulses lasting 17 seconds between the pulses. And so the scientists can't explain this, but it happened on November 11. Now, the thing was, Q prefaced that particular post saying that this was a message from the white hats within the US military industrial complex, basically saying that they had taken over the control of the satellite system used by the bad guys. And so they had taken over the control of the satellite system, and that the bad guys, we're talking about the deep state, tried to back it up with a move, with a replacement, but that Q, which is military intelligence, US military intelligence, had taken it over. Well, think of the timing. November 11. This is a few days after California wildfires. So you can think of it now that the bad guys, the deep state, used their satellite system to basically burn down a lot of California, and in the process target these areas like Paradise, where you had a lot of people working in setting up an advanced human extraterrestrial culture or model that could be used for implementation globally for how humans and extraterrestrials can live side by side in implementing advanced cultures and integrating these different advanced extraterrestrial technologies. So this was something that the deep state wanted to destroy. They didn't want that to happen, so they implemented the destruction of Paradise and other areas using their microwave weapons technologies, using their satellite systems. So a few days over, the white hats intervene, take out these satellite systems used by the deep state, and to kind of like show that US military intelligence are in control. They did it deliberately in basically transmitting these pulses with a 17-second interval between them, because that 17-second interval that symbolizes the 17th letter in the alphabet, which represents what letter?
Q. Yeah.
That's crazy. Hey, let me ask you a question, Dr. Sala, because both you and David are both talking about this. Why would the cabal be so scared of that being set up? Like, what's their motive behind this? Why do that? Why go through all of the effort to burn down that city? And what did the Paradise City actually represent to them?
Well, what I know, I know that there are several inventors working in Paradise to really bring about the kind of Tesla society that various people were working on. I know Ralph Green was very prominent in Paradise. He had a whole team around him, and I believe he was working with extraterrestrials that were living in Paradise. Extraterrestrials had been working with Tesla from the early 1900s. I mean, this is one of the things that has been kind of like kept secret. Tesla had various disciples. One of them was Otis Carr, who actually helped build a flying saucer that was intended to be a civilian flying saucer that would be released to the American public in the early 1960s. But they shut him down. Well, Otis Carr was being helped by extraterrestrials. Ralph Green was involved in that from the late 1950s to the early 1960s. Ralph Green was involved with that. He was silent right up until I think it was around 2010 when he began to go public about what happened. That was 50 years later. He began to talk about it, and he began to get people to basically start thinking about implementing these Tesla technologies. And he came to Hawaii, and there was kind of like efforts to do it over here. But I know that he was doing it in Paradise, that he raised funding, he was getting help, and that there were extraterrestrials there. That was one of the things that I got from Corey Good and some of his sources, that there are extraterrestrials that were living there as part of these secret agreements that go back many, many decades. And in fact, I just released an article on my exopolitics.org website where I talk about a 1989 briefing that was given to the replacement of Dr. Carl Sagan on the MJ12 committee. Sagan was being replaced by another scientist, another famous astronomer, astrophysicist by the name of Dr. Philip Morrison. And in this document, in this Defense Intelligence Agency document, they talk about the secret agreements that date back to the early 1950s, and that human-looking extraterrestrials have been allowed to live amongst humanity. So this is one of the things that the white hats within the military-industrial complex have been wanting to reveal to the general public. And this is why the deep state wanted to destroy this experiment in Paradise, California, and why they used their microwave satellite technologies to bring that about. But they overplayed their hand because they basically provided the justification for the US military intelligence community, for the White Hats, for the Earth Alliance, and for the Secret Space Program Alliance. These are the terms Corey Good uses to take out this kind of deep state satellite system that's been in place. And now the White Hats, the good guys, Q and his people, are in control of these former deep state satellite systems.
So, like what you were talking about, like Q taking over the satellites that were controlled by the deep state and everything, would this all kind of be a part of, from my understanding, I mean, this is my understanding of what Trump kind of wants to do with the Space Force. It will kind of force a little bit of disclosure happening where it will force companies to start producing, they'll start competing with like tech that probably doesn't really exist right now. Like all these different kinds of already, I guess you could say almost like weapons or satellites that are already in space to be revealed. And it's going to put pressure on other governments and all kinds of things as well. And then also like it's going to focus the world to start looking at alternative energy like free energy or like the energy that Tesla was using as well. So as you were talking about this, I started thinking about, well, yeah, if these groups were working with Tesla and they started developing free energy and whatnot, I mean like the 0 point energy and whatnot, then of course like the deep state definitely wouldn't want this stuff to get out because then they would lose all the oil and everything else that they have full control of.
Right. Well, the deep state doesn't want this technology being released. They have been kind of hiding it for a long time, and the whole Space Force idea, the rationale behind it is that Donald Trump knows about these suppressed technologies. I mean, his uncle John Trump was a distinguished professor at MIT, and while he was a professor, he was actually involved in first of all the study of the Tesla papers. John Trump personally was the man that the FBI called upon to bring in to understand Tesla technologies, because one of the things about Tesla technologies was that he was using these high voltage electrostatic charges to create all sorts of effects. The Tesla coil. That the Tesla coil was found to be one of the things that was an integral part of flying saucer technologies. Well, John Trump, Donald Trump's uncle, was an expert in Van de Graaff generators, and Van de Graaff generators they can generate huge electrostatic charges, millions of volts, and this is the thing that generates electrostatic charges. Generates electrogravitic effects, which is used for the propulsion of some of these flying saucer technologies and to basically impact the space-time continuum. So John Trump was an expert on this stuff. And so he was called in, first of all, to give an assessment for Tesla's inventions or Tesla's personal papers that were gathered after Tesla's death in early 1943. Now, in 1947, you actually have the Roswell craft and the Roswell crash. And Massachusetts Institute of Technology was one of the institutions that was involved in the study of the Roswell craft. So John Trump, I would bet anything, was the principal guy at MIT for studying the Roswell technologies to understand the propulsion system, because he was the expert in understanding how high voltage electrostatic charges work. So he was the guy involved in all of this. So this was stuff that John Trump shared with Donald Trump privately. So Donald Trump knew all of this stuff from the time he was a young man. So now he's president of the United States. Now he finally has the power to implement changes to release these suppressed technologies. From what I know, according to Corey Good, this is still a subject of verification, was that Donald Trump, one of the first things he did was that he asked for 1,000 of the 5,700 patent applications that were held up under national security orders to be released. And these patents that Trump wanted released dealt with free energy and advanced health technologies. And that the Space Force is Donald Trump's way of basically having all of these advanced technologies released under the authority of this new force called Space Force, which would kind of like, not only have these advanced propulsion and new energy technologies being released, but also have new health technologies released, which would then persuade the public that the Space Force was worth supporting and having the many hundreds of billions of dollars that would be necessary to be kind of like going into public funding of the Space Force.
So basically what we're talking about is the fact that President Trump definitely is a time traveler.
Well, he doesn't have to be a time traveler because he was told all this stuff by his uncle in the 1980s when his uncle was still alive and Trump had just graduated from Wharton and he was still, basically finding his way forward in terms of establishing his business empire. So he spent a lot of time with his uncle, and his uncle told him all this stuff. So, his uncle was there. He knew all about Tesla and what happened in the 40s with the Roswell crash. So Trump, through his uncle, was given all of these really insightful analyses or presentations of what had historically happened in U.S. history.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I know with Tesla, JP Morgan was funding him in the very, very beginning. And then what happened was that Tesla wanted to give what he was creating for free to people, and JP Morgan's like, well, there's no money in this. So he left and abandoned Tesla and then went with Edison. And so that's when supposedly they stole, like Edison stole a lot of Tesla's ideas because they wanted to make money off of it. And then meanwhile, they were like purposely not having Tesla achieve anything that he was doing. And then that's what I heard, that then he went to John G. Trump and asked for funding. And then Trump was like, yeah, I'll fund you. And then that's started the whole thing of how everything got started.
Well, just to kind of like, bring in some additional information about that whole kind of Wardenclyffe Tower that JP Morgan funded Tesla for building. Tesla told JP Morgan that this was a tower that he would use for radio communications, that would be long distance radio communications, that would be far superior to anything Guglielmo Marconi was developing in Britain. And Tesla was correct. But of course the traditional telling of with all this is that Tesla didn't tell Morgan the truth, that really he was hoping to use this Wardenclyffe Tower as the prototype for a series of towers around the world. There was another tower secretly built in Canada where basically Tesla would wirelessly transmit power. That this was a way to wirelessly transmit power. And Morgan looked at all of this and thought, well, if you have power wirelessly transmitted, then me owning all of these timber companies and these copper companies that build the telegraph poles, that build the wires for the for the electric grid, I'm going to use a lot of money. So this is not a good idea for me. And so the story goes that that's why Morgan decided not to go ahead and funding Tesla. But there's another aspect to this as well, is that Tesla's radio communications were incredibly successful. He began communicating with the other planets.
Whoa.
He began communicating with other planets. He was getting communications. He established communications in Colorado and was also establishing communications in Wardenclyffe, in New York. And not only other planets, he was actually sending out radio transmissions to other solar systems. And so basically Morgan and the people behind him was very worried that Tesla's technologies and the Wardenclyffe tower was going to jumpstart us into becoming a galactic culture, because we were communicating with the Martians and the beings, and other on the moons of other planets of our solar system, and also with the citizens of other civilizations in other solar systems. And if you actually go to this 1989 briefing document that the Majestic 12 Committee had prepared for this new candidate to the Majestic 12 Committee, Dr. Philip Morrison, this article on my website, where I talk about this new investigation into this Majestic 12 document that shows it's actually authentic. That document, it's 47 pages. That document talks about Tesla's experiments and how in Colorado Springs, Tesla's inventions were basically, he began communicating with the extraterrestrials from other solar systems. So this was in Colorado Springs. So by the time Tesla set up the radio towers in Wardenclyffe, it was a much more powerful radio transmitter and receiver. Tesla was receiving the replies from the beings from Alpha Centauri. So you can imagine what Morgan's reaction would have been to Tesla saying, hey, I'm getting answers from Alpha Centauri. They're replying to messages I sent out 4 or 5 years earlier from Colorado Springs. So, you can imagine why Morgan freaked out. Said, I'm not going to fund this. No way. That's the back history. And this the Defense Intelligence Agency document that was prepared in 1989 actually gives you the backstory on the extraterrestrials replying to Tesla's early radio communications and then not getting any response from Tesla. Why didn't they get a response from Tesla? It was because Morgan made sure that Tesla was defunded and that the extraterrestrials wouldn't get any answer, because Morgan and the people behind him did not want us becoming a galactic culture, because that would have happened in the early 1900s if Tesla had received the funding for the Wardenclyffe Tower. Tesla would have announced that we're getting radio signals from Alpha Centauri, and this is what they're telling us. Imagine how our world would have changed so dramatically.
Thank you for completing that story for us, Dr. Sala, because there were a lot of holes there for us, and you really blew our minds there.
Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
I'm really into Tesla. I've been really reading a lot of what he's been doing and everything. So we'll definitely look into that document, because I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
so
me
that's
either.
Very, very interesting stuff, for sure. Going back to Q, I wanted to say one thing real quick, because there's still a lot of people out there that are just like, oh, Q's fake, or he's a LARP or whatnot. But it's been interesting since we've been doing this show. We've been getting a lot of attention from all kinds of different people and some pretty high-level security people. And the interesting thing is, they have told us that the CIA, the FBI, the NSA cannot figure out who Q is. So it's like, okay, if this is just some dude on a computer, why can't the CIA after a year already figure, like no one knows who he is? So like to us, it's very clear that this is not just some LARP or just some group of people that are just having fun. Like to us, it seems very clear that these are very, very high-level officials or somebody within a very close community around Trump's circle, that have very, very specific, detailed information. And the other thing I found so fascinating is with Corey and Wilcock, they both said that they have to wait until Q posts something to basically get the briefings that they previously had, which kind of tells us that, okay, these guys seem pretty legit, because otherwise they would still be out for themselves, like trying to give updates themselves. But it's like their channel has been cut off as well. And so it's like everybody's kind of now listening to what Q says. And then, Corey he said, after something happens, Q will post something and then he kind of gets a briefing afterwards, but not really much before anymore. So I found that really, really fascinating. And I'm just wanting to hear kind of your take on, for the people who don't believe, like what would you say to these people?
Well, I think Q represents a group of U.S. military intelligence officials that are very close to the Trump administration. And they were set up by Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn was Trump's first national security advisor. Flynn previously was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And interestingly enough, the Defense Intelligence Agency was the agency responsible for this document that I was talking about that talked about Tesla and so forth. So Flynn is involved in all of that. He knows all of that. So he was the one that set up around Trump a group of people that would basically provide him high-level intelligence about what is really going on and would protect him and basically insulate him from the efforts from the deep state to kind of like compromise him and take him down, which is why Flynn became a target immediately. So they did take down Flynn, but it was kind of like in taking him down, they didn't take down the system that Flynn had set up around Trump. And so when Trump began to retaliate against the deep state, who were leaking all of these classified documents, he activated this group of military intelligence officials around him that had been basically installed by Michael Flynn, and he activated them and used them to start seeding into the public what's going down, what the deep state's plans were doing. And there's been some real amazing revelations from Q. One that is particularly important for me, and which we actually discussed, was the ballistic missile attack in Hawaii on January 13 of this year. Q actually talked about that a number of times, saying that this was a false flag attack that had been orchestrated by this kind of rogue submarine associated with the deep state's secret navy. Now, one of the things that Q had done was that 6 days before the Hawaii missile alert, so this is on January 6th, January 7th, so this is 6 days before the January 13 false missile alert, Q posted several posts saying that there was a DEFCON 1 situation which would be averted. So a DEFCON 1 situation, what is that? Well, that is a nuclear attack against the United States. So 6 days before that missile alert, Q was actually posting that there would be a DEFCON 1 situation that would be averted. So, don't worry, we got it all under control. So what QAnon was saying was that basically then the Trump administration knew that there was plans to go ahead with launching a missile attack against Hawaii, which was intended to start World War III by pinning the blame on North Korea. But the Trump administration was ready. So when it happened, the ballistic missile that was shot by this rogue CIA submarine off the coast of North Korea, it was shot down by the Air Force Secret Space Program. So Trump was aware of all of this. QAnon was advising him. And so this is the way in which QAnon has been operating, is giving Trump advanced knowledge on all of the things that the deep state is planning to do. Because, the deep state can only survive by implementing these false flag attacks. But if Trump is getting advanced knowledge on these false flag attacks, then he can neutralize these attacks. So that's what's been happening. So this is why Trump is one step ahead of the game. And right now, QAnon has been talking about these secret indictments that are going to be unsealed. Very, very shortly. That there have been these secret grand jury investigations that have been issuing sealed indictments. Now the count is over 60,000 of these, an incredible number, and it kind of seems like, how can this possibly be? But you look at Q's recent posts, just the last couple of days, where he talks about what's been happening at Guantanamo. They're sending military police over to Guantanamo. Over 100 more have been just sent over to Guantanamo to start a long-term deployment. They've built facilities in Guantanamo for new courthouses and to host all of these military police, and for hosting up to 30,000 new detainees in these hut cities there in Guantanamo. So you have to ask yourself, who are they going to house? Is Hillary and the team going there?
Well, and then aside from that, then Trump tweets that image out with all of those, like all of the people behind bars, right? And then all of this is happening at the same time. So it's like, and then Bush dies. And then, so it's just like, wow, you know, it really seems like he's just completely trolling everybody and knows exactly what's going on. But I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was one of my next questions. But why don't you go right in? This leads right into the next question.
Yeah, we actually wanted to kind of, our final question on this episode was actually about the Clinton Foundation. So basically, after the election, donations dropped almost 60%. It seems to show us that there was definitely some shady deals going on. And we really wanted to know about the Clinton Foundation and if you think it's still relevant today.
Right. Well, the Clinton Foundation was, from its inception, a kind of pay-to-play scheme for laundering a lot of money. This is one of the things that the deep state has become very proficient at, is setting up front organizations where they can actually launder a lot of money that goes into the deep state's assets. Because, you know, the deep state, for kind of having these their own kind of like satellite system with all these advanced weapons and underground military bases and a secret fleet with, you know, all of that costs a lot of money. They're certainly not going to get it from Congress. So where do they get it from? Well, they get it from all of these illicit activities, you know, the drug trade, kind of pump and dump schemes on Wall Street, kind of like, you know, pharmaceutical industry scams. So they use all of these kind of like front activities, you know, all these organizations. And so the Clinton Foundation was, from the very beginning, part of this kind of like architecture of CIA front companies and organizations that are designed principally to raise a lot of money for the deep state's assets and projects and programs and so forth. And of course, you know, the Clintons themselves do quite well, as do any others involved in the drug trade or Wall Street pump and dump. You know, they kind of skim off some cream at the top, you know, a couple of percent. But if we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars being filtered through these things, you know, a couple of percent, you know, can make you a multimillionaire or a billionaire. So this is what was happening with the Clintons. But, you know, the thing was, for the success of the Clinton Foundation in being able to do this and raising a lot of funds for the deep state, was that the Clintons were perceived to be very good at being able to generate a lot of kind of like legitimate white world funds to go through the Clinton Foundation, which would be kind of like the cover for a lot of the other money that the deep state was pouring through the Clinton Foundation into all of these programs that they were doing. And of course, you know, as the Clintons lost power, as investigations began, then, you know, a lot of the funding for the Clinton Foundation started to disappear. And of course, when you look at the statistics, right there you have evidence that the Clinton Foundation was really just a pay-to-play scheme designed for politicians around the world to kind of like you know, make large donations and leverage their kind of donations in terms of access to a lot of classified information that the Clintons were able to get through their access to, say, the Five Eyes agreement, where they had all of the information that the Five Eyes countries were able to gather through the Five Eyes surveillance, the NSA documents. This was something that the Clintons could kind of like divvy off to different major nations to kind of like get the intelligence. But all of that has unraveled, and now what we are seeing in the next, actually tomorrow, is that John Huber, the man Jeff Sessions appointed to look into the Clinton Foundation's shenanigans here, that John Huber is going to give his first report to Congress on the Clinton Foundation that there are at least 2 whistleblowers with supporting documentation talking about what was really going on in the Clinton Foundation. And so this is where many people now believe that the rubber's about to hit the road in terms of the whole sealed indictments, the Clinton Foundation, Trump signaling Clinton and Loretta Lynch and Mueller and Comey and Obama, all of these figures shown behind bars. Now we're going to start seeing that with the Clinton Foundation, because John Huber is a federal prosecutor for the state of Utah that was empowered by Jeff Sessions to basically investigate and start prosecutions against anyone involved in any illegal activities that were identified by the different House committees that were concerned about some of the things that were occurring during the Obama administration. So John Huber has the power of prosecuting, and he has other prosecutors assisting him. They were all given authority by Jeff Sessions. And then you have 470 investigators from the Office of Inspector General to basically provide Huber all of the investigatory power he needs. So all of that's going to start coming out on February 5th.
February 5th?
December 5th.
December 5th.
I'm sorry, December 5th.
Yeah, okay.
So actually, what do you predict is going to happen? Do you have any predictions for that? I mean, you covered some of it, but I'm just curious.
Well, and also by the time this episode is released, which it'll be past this
December
too,
5th,
so it'll be past December 5th.
Well, I think December 5th is going to be a critical date, just because this is when Huber first appears, and he's going to be shown to be someone who has real investigatory powers, who has been conducting an investigation for over a year now into all of these range of issues that the Republican committees in the House of Representatives has identified, including the Clinton Foundation. So this is when it's going to become very, very clear that all of the things that Q has been talking about, the sealed indictments, the grand jury investigations, people being tried in military courts, being held in Guantanamo, the deep state being involved in pedophilia, kind of sex crimes, abuses, even the whole satanic practices, all of this stuff that Q has been talking about for a year now, that has real teeth to it. And now these people involved in these things are going to be tried. And their power was always the people that were running or behind the deep state and running all of these illicit programs, their power was always the power of intimidation and fear, and that all of their assets in the deep state complied because they thought the deep state had power. But with the Huber going forward on December 5th, that basically let the cat out amongst the pigeons. Now it's like, okay, the real power is not in the deep state. It's in this Q phenomenon and the people's movement behind it. And that's where the real power is, because the US military and the Trump administration are working with the people, which is why Trump has been doing these mass rallies, and because he is showing that the people are behind the Trump administration, that the US military has Trump's back, and that QAnon is dumping all of the real intel on what's going on. So I think December 5 will be remembered as the day everything changed on the planet.
Wow.
Yeah.
But after
it's really exciting.
Yeah, it is really exciting for sure.
Well, thank you for answering that.
All right, well, this wraps up our episode 1. Dr. Sala, thank you again for joining us. And for you guys, make sure you tune in to our second episode with Dr. Michael Sala.
And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you out
on the edge.